Blackwood, Pennsylvania, sat hidden between dense forests and steep hills. From afar, it looked like any quiet American town. A handful of diners, an old gas station, a crumbling main street with boarded-up shops. But the people who lived there knew that quiet was a lie. Blackwood was a place that never truly slept. Parents warned their children not to walk alone at night. The sheriff's office received more missing person reports than any town its size should. Most people left as soon as they could, but those who stayed learned to ignore the whispers. At the northern edge of town, past a stretch of broken road and thick pine trees, stood Blackwood Asylum. Officially shut down in 1978, the building still loomed like a scar on the landscape. Its windows were shattered, its roof half collapsed, yet locals swore that at night, the place came alive. Some heard screams, some swore they saw faces in the windows, and some, the unlucky few, never returned at all. Megan Harper, 24, had grown up hearing these stories. Her mother used to whisper the same warning every night before bed. "Never go near the asylum, Megan. Nothing good waits for you there. Only death." But Megan wasn't like the others. A budding journalist for a small online news outlet, she craved the truth behind myths and ghost stories. And now, with 6 people missing in the past 2 months, all last seen near the asylum, her instincts told her the real story was waiting in those dark halls. "If I want answers," she told herself, "I'll have to step into the darkness." Megan didn't go alone. She convinced 3 friends to join her investigation. Ryan, 26, a documentary filmmaker with a knack for chasing thrills. He never left home without his DSLR and tripod. Lila, 23, a psychology student obsessed with abnormal behavior and the paranormal. Ethan, 25, Megan's childhood friend. Loyal but nervous, he was the kind of person who double-checked every lock at night. They planned a simple but risky idea. Spend the night inside Blackwood Asylum, record everything, and prove, or debunk, the legends. Ryan laughed as he loaded his camera bag. "If this turns into a YouTube doc, we'll be rich. Ghost hunters would look like amateurs compared to us." But Ethan wasn't laughing. His father had worked at the asylum years ago before it shut down. Ethan had grown up listening to his father's drunken confessions about things that should never have been locked up. "They weren't people," Ethan muttered when Megan asked. "Not after what the doctors did to them." Lila leaned closer, intrigued. "Not people? You mean supernatural?" Ethan shook his head. "Experiments. Illegal ones. Things that trapped them there. My dad said the walls themselves held their screams." Megan felt a chill, but forced a smile. "Then we're doing the right thing. We'll uncover the truth." No more campfire stories, just evidence. At 10 p.m., their car rolled to a stop before the asylum gates. Rusted iron bars towered above them, the paint long peeled away. A faded warning sign dangled from one hinge. "No trespassing. Violators will vanish." "Vanish," Lila whispered. "Not arrested, not fined, vanish." Ryan grinned nervously and adjusted his camera. Creepy as hell. Perfect for the footage. Megan pushed the gates open with a groan of metal. The air that seeped through smelled of mold and damp rot. The asylum loomed in the moonlight like a black husk, its windows like hollow eyes. Inside, every step echoed. The smell of mildew clung to their clothes. Torn patient gowns lay scattered across the floor, brittle with age. Then Ethan froze. "Did you hear that?" The others stopped. At first, there was only silence. Then, like a voice carried on the wind, came a whisper. Soft, drawn out, and unmistakable. "Megan." Megan's blood turned cold. "Someone just said my name." Ryan whipped his camera around. "There's no one here, just the 4 of us." They set up camp in the asylum's main hall, where rows of rusted gurneys lay toppled like corpses. Ryan fixed his camera on the tripod. Lila opened her notebook, scribbling observations. Ethan paced, muttering about leaving. At midnight, the asylum stirred. The overhead lights, dead for decades, flickered once, long enough to throw jagged shadows across the walls. Then darkness swallowed the room again. Ryan gasped, catching it on film. Holy shit, did you guys see that? The lights tried to come back on. Ethan backed against the wall. No, this place is alive. My dad said it feeds on people. A heavy thud rattled the ceiling. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoed above them. There's something walking up there, Lila whispered. Ryan grabbed his flashlight and pointed it upward. Dust drifted from the cracked plaster ceiling. Another step, another, and then silence. But the whisper lingered in her ears, curling around her name like a secret promise. Curiosity dragged them deeper into the asylum. They found the old records room, its shelves collapsing under the weight of moldering folders. Files littered the floor. Megan picked one up, coughing through the dust. The label read, Patient 43 Eleanor H. She opened it and read aloud. Subject shows extreme violent tendencies. Reports of multiple voices inside her head. Experiment number 7 failed. Subject terminated. Lila's eyes widened. They were experimenting on unstable patients. Not treating them, using them. Ryan found another file. Patient 66, Daniel R. After electroshock therapy, subject refuses to die. Continued screaming for 72 hours. Kept in isolation. The air shifted cold, heavy. A sudden wind swept through the room, scattering papers into the air like white birds. And Ethan screamed, "There, by the door!" They turned. A shadow stood in the doorway, tall, human-shaped, but faceless. Just a smear of darkness in the shape of a man. Ryan swung his camera toward it. The viewfinder flickered. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the shadow dissolved into nothing. Lila whispered, trembling, "If there were experiments, the basement would hold proof." Ethan shook his head violently. "No, I'm not going down there. My dad said they locked things away in the basement. Things that weren't supposed to exist." Megan's voice was firm. "We came here for the truth. We're not leaving without it." The basement stairs creaked under their weight, every step plunging them deeper into darkness. Their flashlights cut through the black, illuminating cracked concrete walls slick with moisture. The stench was overwhelming, metallic like rust or blood. At the bottom, iron doors lined the hall. Each bore a number, etched deep into the corroded metal. One door stood out. Across it, in fading red paint, were the words, "Experiment, do not open." Ryan raised his camera. "Holy shit, this is it. This is what people need to see." But before he could finish, a shrill scream erupted from behind the door. So loud, so raw, it rattled their bones. Their flashlights flickered, then went out, and in the darkness, something whispered. Curiosity dragged them deeper into the asylum. They found the old records room, its shelves collapsing under the weight of moldering folders. Files littered the floor. Megan picked one up, coughing through the dust. The label read, Patient 43 Eleanor H. She opened it and read aloud. Subject shows extreme violent tendencies. Reports of multiple voices inside her head. Experiment number 7 failed. Subject terminated. Lila's eyes widened. They were experimenting on unstable patients. Not treating them, using them. Ryan found another file. Patient 66, Daniel R. After electroshock therapy, subject refuses to die. Continued screaming for 72 hours. Kept in isolation. The air shifted cold, heavy. A sudden wind swept through the room, scattering papers into the air like white birds. And Ethan screamed, "There, by the door!" They turned. A shadow stood in the doorway, tall, human-shaped, but faceless. Just a smear of darkness in the shape of a man. Ryan swung his camera toward it. The viewfinder flickered. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the shadow dissolved into nothing. Lila whispered, trembling, "If there were experiments, the basement would hold proof." Ethan shook his head violently. "No, I'm not going down there. My dad said they locked things away in the basement. Things that weren't supposed to exist." Megan's voice was firm. "We came here for the truth. We're not leaving without it." The basement stairs creaked under their weight, every step plunging them deeper into darkness. Their flashlights cut through the black, illuminating cracked concrete walls slick with moisture. The stench was overwhelming, metallic like rust or blood. At the bottom, iron doors lined the hall. Each bore a number, etched deep into the corroded metal. One door stood out. Across it, in fading red paint, were the words, "Experiment, do not open." Ryan raised his camera. Holy shit, this is it. This is what people need to see. But before he could finish, a shrill scream erupted from behind the door. So loud, so raw, it rattled their bones. Their flashlights flickered, then went out, and in the darkness, something whispered. The scream still vibrated in their bones long after it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Every breath they took seemed too loud, too fragile, like it might attract something lurking just beyond the light. Ryan cursed, shaking his flashlight. "Come on, damn it, work!" Finally, the beam sputtered back to life. The basement corridor stretched out before them, the iron doors looming like tombstones. But the one marked "Experiment, do not open" looked different. Its surface seemed wet, glistening as though something had seeped from the inside. Megan whispered, "That wasn't a recording, was it?" That scream was real. Ethan's voice cracked. "We shouldn't be here. I told you, my dad said they locked them away for a reason. They weren't just patients anymore." Lila, wide-eyed, pressed her ear to the cold metal door. "I don't hear anything now." Ryan muttered, "Good. Let's keep moving before it." The door rattled. All four jumped back. Chains bolted across the frame trembled, as if something inside pressed against them. Then came the scratching. Nails or claws, dragging down the steel, squealing with a sound that scraped across their nerves. Ethan bolted. "Nope, I'm done. I'm not dying here." He ran up the basement stairs before anyone could stop him. His footsteps echoed, then vanished into silence. "Ethan," Megan shouted. "Come back." But he didn't. They had no choice but to keep going without him. The basement stretched deeper than they expected, corridors branching like veins. Some doors were ajar, revealing cells with rusted beds and restraints bolted to the walls. The air smelled thicker here, like iron and rot. At the end of one hall, they found something stranger. The floor was stained dark red, the walls painted with symbols, circles, jagged lines, marks that looked less like writing and more like scratches from frantic hands. Lila bent closer, tracing one with her finger. "These aren't medical notes. They look ritualistic, like wards or seals." Megan frowned. "You think the doctors were using occult methods?" Ryan shook his head. "No, doctors don't do this. This is cult shit." As they examined the walls, Ryan's camera flickered. When he looked at the screen, his stomach dropped. The viewfinder showed a figure standing behind Megan. Tall, thin, its face obscured by a crude leather mask. Ryan spun around, flashlight slicing through the hall. Nothing. But when he looked back at the camera, the masked figure was closer. He lowered the camera slowly. Nothing behind Megan. He raised it again. The figure was inches away on screen. Ryan dropped the camera. "We need to leave. Now." They ran back toward the stairs, but halfway up, Ethan stumbled into them, wild-eyed, gasping. His clothes were torn, his face pale as chalk. "Ethan!" Megan grabbed his arm. "Where the hell did you go?" He shook his head violently. I didn't go anywhere. I swear I ran up the stairs, but it brought me back down here. I was running for minutes, but the stairs just looped." Ryan swore under his breath. "This place isn't just haunted. It's trapping us." Lila's lips trembled. "Spatial anomalies, like the building itself is alive." Ethan's voice cracked again. "I heard them. Voices all around me. They kept saying my name. They know us." Then, from the dark behind them, a voice echoed down the corridor. "Ethan!" They froze. The whisper was identical to Ethan's own voice. "Come back." Desperate for answers, they pressed deeper. They stumbled into a locked office, the brass handle rusted but intact. Ryan forced it open with a crowbar he found in the hall. Inside, shelves lined the walls, more patient files, but these were marked with red seals. Lila tore one open. Patient 72, Marcus V. Subject exhibits extreme aggression. Ritual procedure attempted. Result: failure. Subject remains inhuman. Another file read, Patient 88, Eleanor H. Ritual procedure attempted. Subject now speaks in multiple voices simultaneously. Request for termination denied. Research ongoing. Lila's face went pale. They weren't curing them. They were trying to contain them, using rituals. That's what those symbols were. The doctors weren't just experimenting. They were binding. Megan flipped through another file. Her stomach turned cold. Patient 91, Megan Harper. She dropped it. Her name was written in faded ink across the cover. Lila snatched it up, flipping it open. It's blank, except for one note. She read aloud, voice shaking. Subject yet to arrive. Predicted date, August 18th, 2022. The date of their investigation. Megan whispered, "What the hell does that mean?" Before anyone could answer, the sound of dragging footsteps echoed outside the office. Slow, heavy, the kind of steps that carried weight not just in the body, but in the air itself. Ryan aimed his camera toward the door. The figure appeared, 7 feet tall, shoulders broad, frame grotesquely thin, as though stretched. Its face was hidden by a crude leather mask, stitched where the mouth should be. Its hands dragged chains that scraped sparks against the floor. Ethan backed into a corner, whimpering. "That's what I saw. That's what my dad described." The masked man stopped in the doorway. The stitched leather mouth bulged, and then, like a seam ripping, it screamed. Not a human scream, not even an animal's. A deafening roar that shook the walls, shattering glass. Lights burst overhead. The door slammed shut on its own, sealing them inside. When silence fell, Megan realized she was shaking. Her ears rang. Her chest ached. Lila clutched her notebook like a shield. That thing, it wasn't a patient. It was the result. Ryan whispered, "And it knows we're here." In the corner of the office, Megan noticed a hatch in the floor. Rusted, half-buried beneath papers. Ryan pried it open, revealing a narrow tunnel descending into blackness. "Basement under the basement," Ryan muttered. "Great." With nowhere else to run, they climbed down. The tunnel walls were damp stone, lined with more of the strange symbols. The deeper they went, the stronger the stench grew, like rotting meat left in the sun. Torches lined the walls, unlit for decades. Yet as they passed, some flickered to life, one by one, as though guiding them. Finally, they emerged into a cavernous chamber. At the center stood a stone altar, black with age. Chains hung from the ceiling, broken restraints dangling. And on the altar lay dozens of bones. Human. Megan's voice broke. They didn't treat them. They sacrificed them. Lila shook her head. No, they weren't sacrifices. They were vessels. They were trying to bind something here, something bigger. Ryan lifted his camera. His voice shook. Then whatever it was, it's still here. From the shadows, whispers rose. Layered, overlapping, dozens of voices speaking at once. "Welcome back, Megan." The whispers swelled until they became deafening, like a crowd pressing in from every direction. Ryan dropped to his knees, clutching his ears. His camera tumbled to the stone floor, lens cracking. Lila scribbled frantically in her notebook. "These voices, they're not random. They're chanting something, over and over." Megan strained to listen through the noise. It was true. Beneath the overlapping words, a phrase repeated, low and steady. "The vessel returns. The vessel returns." Her chest tightened. "They're talking about me." Ethan's voice cracked. "Why you? Why your name in the files?" Before she could answer, the altar bones shifted. At first just a rattle, then a cascade as they tumbled to the floor. From the pile, a hand emerged, skeletal, flesh stretched thin over bone. Another hand followed. The bones weren't bones anymore. They were assembling themselves, forming a body, tall and twisted, ribs jutting like knives. The whispers stopped. Silence hung heavy, oppressive. Then the figure opened its mouth. Not a scream, not a word, just a sound like wind tearing through a hollow grave. "Run!" Ryan shouted, dragging Megan toward the tunnel exit. They fled through the narrow passage, their flashlights swinging wildly. Behind them, the sound of scraping bone echoed louder and louder, the thing dragging itself after them. The tunnel split in two. Ethan bolted right, the others left. "Ethan, no!" Megan screamed, but he vanished into the dark. They had no choice but to keep moving. The tunnel grew tighter, walls pressing inward. Strange symbols glowed faintly along the stone, pulsing with each step they took. Finally, they burst into another chamber, smaller, lined with shelves of glass jars. Inside each jar floated something unrecognizable. A hand, an eye, twisted scraps of organs. Labels hung in faded ink. Lila gagged. They preserved parts for experiments. Ryan shined his light on one jar. The label read, "Specimen, vocal cord, patient 66. The cord inside vibrated. A faint scream leaked out, muffled by the glass. Megan stumbled back, bile rising. "This is wrong. This place, it's not just a hospital. It's a prison, a lab, a church." Before anyone could respond, the jars rattled violently. Glass shattered. The screams inside spilled into the room, filling the air with an unholy chorus. They fled again, crashing through another door at the far end of the chamber. The hallway beyond stretched into blackness. And there he was. The masked man stood in the middle of the corridor, chains dragging at his sides. The stitched leather over his face was torn now, revealing glimpses of rotted skin beneath. His head tilted unnaturally, listening. Ryan lifted his flashlight. "Oh God!" It followed us. The masked man took one step. Chains screeched across the floor. Another step. Then he broke into a sprint. "Move!" Megan screamed. They ran, the sound of chains whipping closer behind them. The hallway bent sharply, and suddenly they were back in the main basement corridor, the one with the iron doors. Ryan slammed one shut behind them, jamming the crowbar through the handles. But the chains struck the door a second later, the impact nearly knocking it off its hinges. The masked man roared, the sound like metal grinding on metal. They pressed deeper, but found themselves in a corridor they didn't recognize. Doors lined the walls, but none were marked. From one door came a faint voice. "Megan, help me." She froze. "That's Ethan." Before Ryan or Lila could stop her, Megan yanked the door open. Inside was Ethan, at least it looked like him. He crouched in the corner, face buried in his arms. His body shook with sobs. "Ethan!" Megan rushed in. "We thought we lost you." He looked up. His face was wrong. The eyes too wide, pupils like black pits. His mouth stretched unnaturally, teeth long and jagged. "Megan," he said, but the voice wasn't his. It was layered, dozens of voices speaking at once. Ryan grabbed her arm, yanking her back. "That's not Ethan." The thing lunged, its body warped, twisting into a shape that barely resembled human. Claws raked across the concrete as it screeched. Megan slammed the door shut, locking it from outside. The banging didn't stop. Ethan's voice, or what wore his skin, screamed her name until it became something else entirely. "Vessel." They stumbled onward until the corridor opened into what could only be described as a chapel. Rows of broken pews faced a blackened altar. Candles, impossibly still burning after decades, lined the room. Above the altar hung a mural, faded but visible. Doctors in white coats surrounding a massive shadowy figure. The doctors weren't curing it, they were worshipping it. Lila whispered, "It wasn't medicine, it was devotion." They weren't scientists, they were cultists. Megan's stomach turned. Then the asylum was never about patients. It was about feeding this thing. At the base of the altar lay more files. Megan picked one up, Her heart froze. Patient 100, the vessel. Female. Arrival predicted. Containment pending. There was no photo, only one line written beneath. She will return to complete what began. Megan dropped the file, her hands trembling. It's me. I'm the vessel. Ryan shook his head violently. No, no way. You're not a part of this. This is just prophecy bullshit. But the mural above them seemed to move in the flickering candlelight. The shadow in the painting stretched, its eyes glowing faintly red. And then a voice filled the chapel, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. The vessel has come home. The candles blew out, plunging the chapel into darkness. The only light came from Ryan's flickering flashlight. Megan screamed, clutching her head. The whispers were louder now, inside her skull. Lila grabbed her shoulders. Fight it. Don't let them in. But Megan's body convulsed, her eyes rolling back. Her voice deepened, layered with others. They made me. They prepared me. I was always meant to return. Ryan shook her violently. Megan, listen to me. You're not their vessel. You're you. Fight it. For a moment, her eyes cleared. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Help me. Then her body jerked violently, throwing Ryan across the room. Chains wrapped around her wrists from nowhere, binding her to the altar. The mural above bled darkness, shadows spilling into the room like smoke. They gathered around Megan, seeping into her mouth, her eyes, her skin. Lila screamed. They're trying to take her. Ryan staggered to his feet, grabbing the broken camera from the floor. He aimed it at Megan, recording. If this thing is real, he muttered. People need to know. Even if we die here. The shadows swirled, taking shape. A massive figure rose from the darkness, its form shifting, unsteady. A head too large, arms too long. Its body stitched together from hundreds of faces screaming in unison. The voice boomed again. The vessel belongs to us. Her blood seals the bond. Ryan shouted, Take me instead. Leave her. The figure paused. Then it laughed. A sound like 1,000 voices choking at once. One life for another. The choice is hers. Megan's head lifted, eyes glowing red. The voices inside her spoke. Ryan, you can't save me. Run. But Ryan shook his head. I'm not leaving you. The air was suffocating. The asylum walls no longer looked abandoned. They pulsed as if veins ran through the plaster. Every door creaked open and shut by itself, and whispers bounced endlessly, layering into one chaotic chorus. Lucas clutched the journal tighter. He felt its leather grow warm, as though the words inside were breathing. Sarah stood at his side, pale and trembling, but determined. Behind them, only emptiness stretched. Their friends gone, consumed, claimed. They were the last. They stumbled into the lowest floor of the asylum, where the staircases ended in a yawning black corridor. The journal had mentioned this place only once. The chamber where voices are born. The smell of rotting wood and something fouler clung to them. The floor was slick with moisture, reflecting the dim glow of Lucas's flashlight. The beam flickered. Don't stop walking, Sarah whispered. They entered the chamber. It was massive, larger than any room in the asylum should have been. The walls bent outward as if the asylum itself had expanded to contain this monstrosity. Rows of hospital beds were stacked along the edges, but the patients were still in them. Their corpses twisted, jaws hanging, yet from their mouths poured a constant murmur. The whispers. Lucas's stomach lurched. The dead were whispering endlessly, feeding something unseen. At the far end stood a figure. The doctor returns. Dr. Harold Whitmore, the man from the photographs, the founder of Blackwood. But he wasn't a man anymore. His face stretched unnaturally long, skin waxen and gray, eyes like hollow pits burning faintly red. His coat dragged across the floor, smeared in black stains. You shouldn't have come, the voice echoed, though his mouth hardly moved. Lucas felt his knees weaken. What are you? Whitmore tilted his head. I am what remains when you feed an idea with blood. This place, These voices, they are mine. My patients gave their souls to silence their pain. Now they whisper forever. Sarah's voice cracked. You murdered them. You created this. Whitmore's laugh was like metal scraping. Murder? No, I gave them eternity. And now, I will give it to you. The corpses stirred. The escape attempt. Hands shot out from the beds, skeletal fingers clawing. The whispering grew to a deafening roar. Lucas grabbed Sarah and sprinted, dodging hands that scraped their clothes and pulled their hair. Run! But the chamber shifted. Every turn led them back to Whitmore, standing impossibly still at the center, his hollow eyes following. You cannot leave. Blackwood keeps what it swallows. The journal in Lucas's hand burned. Without thinking, he opened it. The pages flipped violently to the final entry. Burn the voices. He realized. The journal itself wasn't a record. It was a key. Lucas pulled Sarah toward a rusted lantern hanging from the wall. It still had kerosene. His hands shook as he tore a page from the journal, shoved it into the flame, and hurled it onto the nearest bed. The corpse ignited instantly. The whispers shrieked. The flame spread, leaping bed to bed, body to body. The air filled with 1,000 screams, not of agony, but of release. The whispers died, one by one, replaced by silence for the first time since they entered the asylum. Whitmore's face twisted, his figure unraveling like smoke. No, you cannot silence them. They are mine. But the fire consumed him, tearing his form apart until nothing remained but ash. The asylum shook violently. Walls cracked, beams groaned, and dust rained from the ceiling. Lucas and Sarah sprinted through the chaos, dodging falling debris and leaping over smoldering beds. The fire spread faster than the building could hold. Flames licked the walls, swallowing corridors, devouring doors. The screams faded into silence, leaving only the crackle of fire and the thunder of collapsing wood. They burst through the front doors as the entire asylum roared behind them, a giant collapsing beast. The building caved in, swallowed by its own history, and finally lay in ruin, burning against the night sky. They collapsed on the wet grass outside, gasping, coughing smoke. For a long time, they just stared at the inferno. It was over, or so they thought. Lucas realized the journal was still in his hand. The leather was unburned, untouched by fire. When he opened it, new words had appeared on the first page. You silenced them, but the voices always return. The wind carried faint whispers through the trees. Sarah looked at him with wide eyes. Do you hear that? Lucas didn't answer. He only closed the journal and shoved it into his backpack, as the first sirens of approaching fire trucks echoed in the distance. Epilogue, 10 years later. A decade later, the land where Blackwood once stood was cleared. Developers built neat rows of suburban houses, families moving in, laughing children filling the streets. But in one house, the one built directly over the old asylum's foundations, a young boy whispered to his mother late at night. The voices tell me stories when I sleep. The mother smiled tiredly, brushing his hair. That's just your imagination. But as she turned off the light, she could have sworn she heard them too. Faint, endless whispers, crawling up from the ground. Blackwood was gone, but the voices were never silenced.